Kia ora. So would you mind please starting with a brief introduction? So that could just be your name, but feel free to add your age, profession, and where you're from.
Sure. Hello. So I'm Diane. I'm 56 years old and I am originally from Southland in New Zealand, but have been living in Melbourne in Australia for the last about 21 years. I am a registered nurse, a dog walker, and a child sexual abuse survivor.
Kia ora, Diane. And can you please tell us a little bit about what you know about Help Auckland and how you came to hear of us?
Yeah, sure. So probably it was about 18 months ago when I was on Instagram, and I have a little Instagram page. And when I was looking at someone else's post, they had shared your information. So I then, had a look into Help Auckland's page on Instagram and started following Help Auckland from there. And I just found, that you had really good resources and information. At that time, I didn't sort of get to go really deep into your information, but I definitely knew about some of your services and how supportive they are and how important they are.
Thank you. And would you mind please telling us a little bit about your past sexual abuse experience? Just whatever you feel comfortable with saying. So how old you were at the time and what happened. Um,
Yeah, sure. So I was about 12 years old, actually probably 11, but yeah, 11 or 12. And I was sexually abused for 4 years by my oldest sister's husband. And when it started, he was 24. He made it out like an affair and did most sexual acts that you could imagine. I told no one about it for decades. It was a very deep, dark, dirty secret to keep, which in hindsight has done a lot of conscious and unconscious damage to me, my body, and my soul. So in 2020, during COVID, like a lot of people, my mental health declined to an all-time low, where I had intrusive suicidal thoughts, which I had never experienced before and were extremely scary. So, yeah, after 40 years, I decided I would tell my oldest sister, whose husband it was. She believed me. She confronted him. He admitted it. And then fast forward 3+ years, but 3 very long years as well. The abuser has been convicted and sentenced, which is a rare occurrence in historical sexual abuse. He got 8 months home detention. Like I say to people, I got a life sentence from the age of 12. And my oldest sister and brother no longer talk to me.
I'm sorry about the impact that that had on your relationships as well and your family. And I guess how did all of that leave you feeling?
So again, I suppose at the time of the abuse, um, again, yeah, consciously and unconsciously, yeah, it leaves you feeling like worthless, less than other people, damaged. And this played out in my day-to-day life. And as I progressed into my latter teenage years, it left me with such a like fucked up perception of love, relationships, and sex that I left myself open to like further sexual exploitation and harm. And then I suppose now, sort of, yeah, going through that trauma in a different way, processing it for the last 4+ years, yeah, I'm moving away from having those thoughts of feeling worthless, but it's been, yeah, a lot of hard work.
Yeah. It's been, yeah, and the court process obviously takes quite a long time as its own section or part of your journey towards justice and healing. Just wondering how the court process helped you, or it it may not have helped you. Like, would you mind speaking to that?
Yeah, so I suppose first of all, when I told, well, first my um, sister closest to me, who's been very supportive, well, not even very, extremely beyond words, supportive, and then in the end, I told my sister whose husband it was, and even then, I still had no intention of, taking it any further, like legally. But I think it was mainly due to some of their responses, and also, I suppose, me developing an understanding with a lot of psychology work that one, it wasn't my fault, which of course it's never a child's fault, but it took me about 40 years to realize it was never my fault. Also, that it's a crime. And also, if we just keep sweeping it under the carpet, then we're never going to improve these terrible statistics of child sexual abuse and, protect children of the future. So, yeah, so the question was about court. So, so, yes, as time went on, and yeah, like I say, a certain part of my family wanting to sweep it under the carpet and realizing what a crime it was, I decided I would go ahead. Um, and like you said, it was a very lengthy, very drawn out process. And but luckily, yeah, I had a lot of good friends and some family supporting me, so that yeah, I survived the process. Um, and I would definitely also say it's not probably for everyone. Yeah, if someone asked me, oh, should I report? It would always come down to how that person feels, what they want to do, and it's got to be 110% their decision because it's not an easy process.
Yeah, we at Help we definitely don't encourage or discourage people that, just provide them with the information because it is such a huge undertaking. And we're seeing sort of 40% at the moment, it's over 40% of cases going to trial are taking longer than 2 years. So yeah, it's definitely, and that COVID obviously impacted that further as you found in your case.
Mm.
So looking at other ways that people can seek support and improve their mental health after trauma. So how have your family, friends, and community helped you during that process? And are there any activities like exercise or meditation or therapy that supported your healing?
Yes. Well, like I've probably already mentioned, luckily for me, I have my very, very supportive sister next to me and also my husband, um, who my husband, he's very quiet and supportive in his own way. And people that know him appreciate how he and my sister next to me have really, really got me through the last few years. And then extremely closely behind them is I'm very lucky that I have lots of good friends in Australia and New Zealand and even around the world. And yeah, once they learned about the, sad, massive secret of child sexual abuse that I've been holding for 40 years, I was worried that, because of how you feel, I was like, oh, they probably won't want to be my friend anymore. They won't, want to know me. And it's been 150% the opposite. So I've been so lucky in that way. As I mentioned, yeah, in 2020, I sought out another psychologist for the third time in my life, and at a great financial cost in Australia. That support 4 years later is still ongoing and will be into the foreseeable future. And then over the past 2 years, I've also found a great somatic mentor whose name is Stacey Webb. She's in New South Wales, and she has really helped me to like move the trauma um, out of my body. And just to probably explain that very briefly, like, for example, um, I can mentally, intelligently, think and know sexual abuse is not the child's fault ever. However, when I maybe talk about that, my stomach starts turning or my chest gets tight. So it's still like my body still isn't believing that. So we do this, a lot of somatic work to help move that out of your body, which I've found really, really good. Um, the other thing is I've just actually changed psychologists to one who does some EMDR and schema therapy. So I'm just starting, and that's sort of a lot more body based as well. So I'm just starting to get into that. And then otherwise, for me, it's just time spent in nature with my husband and friends, and just appreciating the simple things in life, that have really helped me.
Yeah. Been looking forward to the summer. More time
Yeah,
outside and in nature.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and so do you feel like you're in a better place now than you were before?
Yes, definitely. Um, like probably even, about 4 years ago, people used to, you'd hear people talking when I listened to podcasts and different things saying, oh, you've got to do the hard work. And I never really understood what they meant or, what that meant. Um, However, 4 years down the track, I can now see what they mean, that it is a very long, slow process working through that childhood trauma. And of course, you need professional help to do that. But it's not until, you take a moment and look back, um, and then you actually realize how far you've come. So, yeah, definitely, like my mental health is a lot more stable. So, yeah, feeling generally much better all the time. Not that dark depression that I had 2 or 3 years ago. Obviously, I'm always going to have the complex PTSD symptoms, but again, with all this therapy and different work I'm doing, um, it's all helping.
And why do you think that free specialized support services for survivors of sexual abuse and their loved ones are so important? I think some of the services that you've engaged with in Australia have not necessarily been free. So
No, and that has been, a bit of an issue living in Australia. Um, However, I did actually approach a few years ago, like ACC, and also a different New Zealand sort of sexual abuse charity to see if I could get some support or counselling through that. But they both advised because I don't live in New Zealand, they were unable to help me, um, even though the abuse occurred in New Zealand. So, yeah, so 4 years later, I am approximately $30,000 out of pocket from psychology and somatic therapy. That will be an ongoing thing. There are some rebates for like 10 psychology sessions a year in Australia, but of course, with complex trauma, you need a few more than 10 a year. So, yes, that is a thing. I think in New Zealand, probably a little bit luckier that, like with organisations like Help Auckland, that people can actually get some help without having to be out of pocket, because it just means a lot of people wouldn't ever be able to afford to deal with these issues that were never their fault, but they need help with to live a better, happier life.
yes, I know that. So seeing some psychologists here, I mean, it can be sort of around that 200, anywhere between 200 to 300 plus, and having adequate mental health support shouldn't just be for those who can afford to pay that, and especially paying that on a long-term basis. That's a huge financial ask. Um, so what are some of the changes that you've already seen in the space over the last decade? And what further changes would you like to see? So that could be in terms of legislation, support services, um, having more free support services, and society's response to sexual abuse.
Oh, how long have we got? Um, yes, having just gone through the New Zealand legal process this year, well, it came to a conclusion this year. There are many, many changes that need to occur, and some within, like, I believe some actual legal changes, law changes, and then also just some ways that, yeah, that the whole service and legal service and system needs to be more victim friendly. I know that they have, there have definitely been small improvements over the years to be more victim friendly. However, from my experience, it's still very perpetrator heavy friendly. And an example of that is like after I made my statement here and it got sent to over, which was how the process had to work. Like the abuser and his lawyer had access to every single word I said, every statement, every bit of written evidence, everything. But like myself or, the police lawyers have no idea about, their plan, their defense or their bullshit that they're coming up with. And then another example from actually, so my perpetrator pled guilty in the end to avoid basically going to jail. So he did a deal, which is another separate discussion on its own. But so I just went over to New Zealand, which was, again, a very good thing of the justice system. They paid for me to go to New Zealand to attend the sentencing and where I could read my victim impact statement. But however, on that day, the judge took it upon himself not to read out the charges that were against the person who sexually abused me. And I had a lot of supporters in court that day. And so he said it was to spare me and my many supporters in court further trauma. But the judge never asked me that before or any time.
That
And
decision
I
should be left
actually
to you.
yes. And I realise a lot of people wouldn't want the charges read out because they are a bit graphic. But I was like, I would have said, yes, I want them read out so that people there, including my brother who supports the sexual abuser, not me, so he could hear it, and not just him, but everyone could hear what this person had done and what sexual acts he performed on me and got me to perform on him when I was a child. So, yeah, things like that. We've still got a bit of a way to go. And
I think
what
even
else
the
did you ask?
process with the name, I think you spoke to me earlier about the process with name suppression as well, and how even that's a
Yes.
lengthy.
So, yes, I didn't know, and no one had told me, which, was probably just an oversight. But I had talked to the court liaison and the detective and everyone about name suppression, meaning his name. So I didn't want his name suppressed because I wanted people to know who it was and what he had done. But anyway, after going to court, going through all that process, I was talking to the court liaison person a few days later and saying about how I'm going to be doing more interviews and podcasts and advocating, and that's what I want to do. And they turned around and said, "Oh, you better be careful because your name's suppressed." And I was like, "What? What do you mean my name's suppressed?" And they're like, "Yeah, we would have told you." I said, "No, we didn't. You didn't." But anyway, so it's actually a law in New Zealand. It's not a law in Australia, but Um, as a victim of a sexual crime, your name is automatically suppressed by law. And I think that was designed to encourage more people to come forward and report abuse and assault, knowing that their identity wouldn't be exposed. However, once again, it would be nice if you had the option in there to be asked. And again, probably the majority of people, and obviously young children and that, need name suppression 110%. But in my case, I didn't want that. And then I had to write a letter, apply to the judge to ask that that name suppression be lifted, and then the judge went on holiday for a month. And so it was 3 months later before I got my name suppression lifted. Obviously, once I knew that I had name suppression, I made sure I didn't mention his name. But I don't. The thing was, I don't have any desire to mention his name all the time because it's not worth mentioning. But I want to be able to share my story and my experience to help other people.
Yeah, I know our court support team, they advise their clients about the name suppression process and like getting that lifted because otherwise you don't know. You're just sort of sometimes expected to know these things. And
Mm.
yeah, it's yeah, really tricky. Were there any other changes that you wanted to see in terms of sexual abuse legislation or support services or society's response? Or
Yeah, yeah,
that'll be a whole other
definitely.
interview.
Yes, but briefly,
Mm.
um, yeah, just I think people, yeah, I suppose the average person in the community, um, because of child sexual abuse being a terrible topic and experience, if you unfortunately experienced it, that people that haven't experienced it just don't want to think it's happening, don't want to um, believe it could happen in their family or their suburb or whatever. And so by burying their head in the sand, it just literally leaves their own children, family, extended family, any loved ones, any children at real risk of being sexually abused. And again, with organisations like yours, I know you're doing more prevention and education work. And that's just so important because I really believe, yeah, by speaking out and by organisations like Help Auckland trying to educate more and more people, that's the only way we're going to, greatly decrease this epidemic and ideally stop it. But that probably isn't going to happen in my lifetime.
Thank you. Thank you, Diane. I think that leads nicely into the next question around how, since going through the court process, how have you continued to advocate for survivors of sexual abuse? So I know you've done a couple of podcast appearances and you've got your Instagram page. Yeah, would you mind telling me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so yes, again, so many things, but probably one thing, just even speaking out and sharing on my Instagram page, which I actually initially started just for myself, and I didn't even identify myself initially. But as time went on, and yeah, got more help and felt more confident, I identified myself. And on there, I now share basically a mixture of my thoughts and experiences and reality of living as a survivor of child sexual abuse, and also share information from other people's Instagram pages that I believe will help other people. So I'm just trying to share their words and advice and information, all to try and reduce the incidence of child sexual abuse. However, yes, it has been amazing since I have been open about this and people have got to know my Instagram page or back in Southland where I come from. People talk, especially smaller country New Zealand. And yeah, just even I've had quite a few people approach me or tell my supportive sister next to me. They're like, oh yeah, that happened to me, that happened to my sister, 40 years ago, 20 years ago. Um, it's so good that, Diane's talking about it. I never felt I could, but now, yeah, like they're telling people probably not the first time. They might have told a partner or something, but yeah, it really is making a bit of a difference, which is good. And then, like you mentioned, I have done the one podcast, and with that podcast is called Dear Little Me, and that was in 2022. And actually, just a couple of weeks ago, I did another podcast with the same person, just updating, sort of giving an update on the past 2 years, and that should be out in the next month or so. And then, moving forward, I just plan to do more podcasts, interviews, education, advocating, awareness work, just to help reduce this epidemic.
And would you mind just sharing, for anyone watching as well, your Instagram handle for your Instagram page? You may have said it, and I may have missed it, but yeah.
No, I don't think I have said it yet. So it's F for Fred, so FFS for Sam, .trauma. So FFS.trauma. And if you have a look at that, you'll see what FFS really stands for.
Oh no, is it not, for fuck's sake? Okay. I'll I'll have to go and have a look myself.
You might be right.
So do you have any advice for anyone who has been sexually abused and needs help?
Yes. So basically, the sooner you can reach out and get help, the better, whether that be, just to one person, like a friend, a partner, a helpline, a professional, or just someone. The sooner you can do that, the better. However, having said that, you can also only do that when you are ready to do that. And yeah, in hindsight, I wish I could have, got some, reached out sooner and got some help and things like that, but it just wasn't the right time. It just wasn't even like possible. But yes, sooner the better. Definitely seek professional help and support, as you will need it. And that's another thing that quite often, if you make a first, second, third attempt to get help, it may not be exactly the right person or the right therapist or the right organisation or the right match for you, but do keep trying, because you will find someone that can really help you, hopefully. And the other thing is, I really hope, and you really need, one or two really supportive people in your corner, as you'll need them, especially on sort of the really dark days and dark times. And yeah, I was lucky. I had a lot and still have a lot of, very supportive friends, husband, one sister, and extended family. And then, of course, make sure you use resources and supports that are out there, and there are a lot, even, online, and such as organisations as Help Auckland, who can offer a lot of, support, information, and assistance.
Thank you. And so yeah, that sort of wraps up my questions. But is there sort of anything else that you wanted to add? About Help Auckland, or your own personal story?
Yeah, probably a couple of things. So first of all, I know one thing we mentioned and I haven't really spoken about is talking about like holidays and holiday season, and especially if your perpetrator is a family member or extended family member, it can be really difficult time because for me, every time I went back to New Zealand to visit my family, who I wanted to see all my family except for that one person, I actually got physical health symptoms 1 or 2 weeks before going back to New Zealand. And then, of course, when I got there, everyone's so excited to see me and, rah, rah, rah. And then I knew he would be there. And I would be at the point where I was just about physically vomiting. But yeah, I just had to put on this facade and make out everything's fine, and pretend all was okay and just try and avoid him. But yeah, it can be really difficult in those times. Otherwise, yes, help Auckland. Well, I'd just like to thank you for letting me share my story with you, Mac, and help Auckland. And hopefully, this will help someone out there who feels like most child sexual abuse survivors, that they have to carry this dark, deep, dirty secret themselves when in fact you don't. And help is available and you are worth it. Um, and yeah, just I like to push this point home because it took me 40 years to realize it, that there is only one person to blame for the sexual abuse that happened to you, and that is the perpetrator, and definitely in no way you, the child. And yeah, it can take a long time to learn, believe, and embody this, but you can learn. So, yes, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for your time, Diane, and for speaking with us from Melbourne, and also just for that was such a poignant message at the end. So thank you as well for sharing that last message with people watching, and everything for sharing your story and for your time and yeah, your courage, your humor, your emotion, like all of your learnings. You're awesome. So thank you. And also, if anyone is struggling over the holiday season and over Christmas, yeah, that story is one that Help has been quite familiar with. Just please, if anyone needs a number to call, it's 0800 623 1700. So unfortunately, that doesn't extend to Australia, but for anyone across New Zealand, across Aotearoa, even if you're not based in Auckland, Tamaki Makaurau, we can forward you onto other immediate support services who can be there for you. So thank you so much again, Diane.
Thank you.